In the SLS story, the big thing was when Henry on a Mark Bolan TV special saw The Damned. That was like his first vision of punk. Is that right?
Well, I can't actually remember his exact sort of road to Damascus turning, but
but the hair was cut.
The hair was cut. Yeah,
next
yeah.
day
I mean,
it was as big as that.
Yeah, he did pitch up at my parents' house, and I almost didn't recognise him, you know.
Right.
And yeah, what available punk records there were, Henry had bought them all. You know?
Right.
I think at that stage there probably were only about 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd heard, along with Henry, I'd heard The Damned on John Peel's show, and I kind of thought it was fun, but it wasn't serious.
Right.
And you know, at that stage, I mean, Dr. Feelgood struck me as serious.
Right.
As did sort of like Graham Parker and the people I was listening to.
Yeah.
The Damned, while it was undeniably fun, and it contained the big dumb noise element that I was still very fond of.
Right.
I didn't see it as in any way serious. I mean, I enjoyed the records when Henry played them to me, and I went out and bought as many of them myself. It wasn't until I actually heard The Clash that it suddenly became serious.
And that was basically the lyrics, because the Pistols and the Damned, they were having a good time and making lots of noise, but suddenly with The Clash, the debut album, there was lyrics about life.
Absolutely. And I mean, it hit home in quite a big way probably because of the grounding in the Highway Star thing and the stuff we were playing. You know, I was singing songs about sort of bowling down Californian highways, and I'd never been further west than Galway in my life. And, you know, it just didn't, make sense to me. And of course, I mean, it had never even dawned on me that the Eagles were in fact writing about their own lives. That just didn't occur to me at all, because, America was a different planet,
Yeah.
And then to suddenly hear these guys on a proper record singing songs about growing up in West London was like, well, that's no different from growing up here, really.
Right.
And so then, that was a big sort of sea change in my approach to what we were doing.
Right. And State of Emergency, was that the first song that you wrote on your own about the Irish problem?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was actually the first song I wrote for the band.
Right.
And yeah, that was basically the sort of my take on what was happening around me in Belfast.
Right.
And in fact, we almost felt like we'd done it then. We've written the song about Northern Ireland, let's just leave it alone.
Right.
But of course, if you were going to write songs about your life and where you'd grown up, where you come from, well, that was what it was,
You were a very sensitive age when the spate of troubles in '69 began.
I was 11. Yeah.
11, right. Can you, but without going into it too sort of deeply, what was the big change in atmosphere, say, from '68 through to '71, '72, that you remembered as a kid of 10 or 11?
I mean, my memories of that time are basically sort of snapshots. I remember being aware, because the actual sort of violence didn't kick off exactly where I was living. It kicked off about sort of a mile or so down the road. And while that doesn't sound a huge distance, it probably was in those days, because of the way Belfast was, and to a lesser degree now still is divided. I mean, you could have one area would be a Catholic area, and then literally sort of, the next sort of 5 or 6 streets would be a Protestant area, and then the next sort of 3 or 4 streets would be Catholic. It was like there was like a patchwork quilt.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like sort of Derry, where there's a river runs through it, and one side's Catholic, the other side's Protestant.
Right.
So there were potential flashpoints all over the place. So, like I said, that just being a mile down the road wasn't as it was a huge distance, but it wasn't, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, indeed.
My initial memories, my overriding memories of it starting were basically during the summer. I was vaguely aware of like the civil rights marches and stuff like that, and the sort of students getting involved, and it all becoming violent. But my initial memories are literally sort of sitting during the summer holidays on a pavement with some friends, and we sort of spread out the local newspaper, which had photographs of sort of rioting and stuff going on in your hometown, basically. And I mean, if anything, it felt like a sort of a really sort of strange game. It didn't seem particularly serious until you actually it started moving a bit closer, and then you realised it wasn't actually as funny as it looked. But it all just felt otherworldly almost, really.
Right. Even though it was just a short way away.
Yeah.
Right. And returning to Highway Star became Stiff Little Fingers, and you started going out as a punk band.
Yeah.
And not all of the pubs where you used to get gigs were too happy about this.
Well, as I said, we never got that many gigs to start with.
Right.
But no, I mean, there were very few places to play.
So you had to, in the end, start self-promoting and finding your own
We
gigs.
did, yeah. I mean, well, having said that, though, the first gig we did get was actually in a proper pub. It was a place called Lamb's Lounge, which is on the Newton Ards Road. I think it's still there, actually. And in fact, that's how we ended up with the name, because I was down at Henry's place. Henry was the only one in the band who actually had a telephone as well. And that was the other thing, you forget, everybody even got mobile phones these days. Didn't even have a phone in the house then. And we had originally called ourselves The Fast, I think was the name we came up with. And we found out, we told this guy that's what we were called, and he was booking the ads, and then we discovered that there was a band from New York who had the same name. And God knows why, delusions of grandeur, we decided we'd best change it just in case we clashed with these guys. Don't ever come across them before or since. Of course, this guy was putting ads in the paper, and up to this point, we hadn't actually got a name.
Right.
So he happened to phone Henry's when I was there one day, and Henry sort of covered the mouthpiece and turned to me and said, "It's that bloke from the pub. He wants to know what we're called." And Henry had a copy of the first Vibrators album lying there, and I literally picked it up and just went down the song titles, and it was like, oh, no, Stiff Little Fingers. I said, tell him we're called Stiff Little Fingers, and we'll change it next week after we've done the gig.
Yeah.
And so that's what we went out as, and we actually got quite a good review, so we were stuck with the name ever since. So
Right.
it was never supposed to happen like that.
Right.
But yeah, the self-promotion thing did come about because there were, at that stage, there were like 3 gigs you could get. There was Jordanstown Poly, which is now, I think, the new University of Ulster. There was Queen's University itself, and there was the Pound Club, which basically played home to people who were playing basically the Highway Star type material, but a lot better than we played it. None of those were particularly keen to give you a gig. So yeah, we did start hiring places on our own. The most notable of which was there was a stable block, literally a stable block, attached to a hotel called the Glen Mackin, and we used to hire that and put gigs on. But you weren't actually allowed to put a gig on.
Right.
It was a strange thing. You had to say you were hiring it for a party, and then you'd stand out in the car park and flog the tickets. And the tickets were all sort of designed as invites to this do.
Right.
And that was how you got round it, and then you were the entertainment at the do.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
You know, the idea. Yeah, we did that quite a few times.
And did you support the Pink Fairies? Is that
was
true?
Highway Star, yeah.
That was Highway Star.
But the Pink Fairies
yeah.
didn't show up. We did the gig, and they never turned up. I don't know what happened to them.
Right.
So that we didn't actually support them in the end at all. But we were on the posters, yeah.
And the Clash were due to come to Belfast,
Yeah.
is that right? And
Yeah,
that had to be cancelled as
We're
well.
diving about a bit. Yeah, the Clash did. To be fair to the Clash, they did actually turn up, but they weren't allowed to play.
Right.
They were due to play at the Ulster Hall, and the story was that the insurance was cancelled on the gig at the last moment, so it couldn't go ahead. And I mean, that was quite an interesting evening as well, because obviously I went down to go to the gig, and got there and we found out it was, it wasn't going to happen. And there was a bit of sort of disturbance and stuff in the street at that point. But what amazed me, not the disturbance in the street, because that's what happened, but what amazed me was the number of people that were there.
Right.
Because up to that point, I thought there was just sort of Henry, myself, and a couple of other folk that were in like-minded bands that actually had even heard of the Clash.
Right.
But there were quite, there were a good couple of hundred folk there. So I mean, that opened my eyes a bit as well. I thought, I'm not the only person sort of with the guilty secret that I actually like these guys.
Yeah. Was Melody Maker and NME, were they easy to get in Belfast?
Oh, yeah.
So there was all that sort of...
I mean, we were aware of what sort of punk rock was in the mainland, and obviously sort of, mainly in London.
Yeah.
I mean, they were as readily available as they are anywhere.
And the next crucial thing was bumping into a couple of journalists.
Again,
Colin McLennan.
We didn't really bump into them.
You courted them.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, we certainly courted Colin. Colin McClelland wrote a entertainment column in the Sunday newspaper, the Northern Irish Sunday newspaper. And it was obvious from the stuff he was writing that he used to manage bands and stuff in the past. And we weren't actually looking for a manager, I don't think, at the time. I mean, basically what I was trying to do was just get some publicity for the band.
Right.
So while I was supposed to be working in an accounts office, I spent large portions of my day writing these letters to Colin, just basically pestering him to mention the band.
Yeah.
And he actually printed a few of the letters in full, which was, was great, because, in among all my sort of rantings against the Northern Irish music business, I basically obviously took the time to plug the fact that we were playing, so we always got a free plug.
Right.
But in the course of his column, he'd mentioned that he had this friend, Gordon Ogilvie, who kept trying to get him to listen to records by people like the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Damned and what have you. So I actually thought, well, there's an in there, because Colin may not be interested in coming to see us, but if his mate's into this sort of thing, maybe I can get him down by inviting his mate along as well.
Right.
So they'll both come and see us, and we might carry on getting all this free publicity.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what happened. They came along to one of the shows at the Glenmachan.
Were you performing State of Emergency at that point? Was that one, or were
Yeah,
you
we
strictly
did.
still covers?
Yeah, we did play. I mean, the set was... I mean, basically what we did with Stiff Little Fingers when it first formed, because we didn't have any material of our own, we basically took the Highway Star idea, just a covers band, and except instead of playing, the Dr. Feelgood and Rory Gallagher stuff, we sort of ditched that wholesale and just, played, I think, almost the entire first Damned and Clash albums. That was pretty much the set,
Right, right.
They came along, and I was chatting to them afterwards, and they basically said, have you got time to get together next week for a drink and a chat? And we did, and while I think that sort of, Colin had one idea on, helping us along up the ladder or whatever, Gordon was very much a frustrated songwriter, because he didn't play any instruments.
What was your first impression of him? He's a Daily Express journalist.
I didn't actually know he wrote for the Daily Express when I first met him. I mean, I knew he was a journalist,
Yeah.
But I didn't know for what newspaper. My only impression of him was that he knew a lot about the music that we were playing,
Right.
and was obviously, it wasn't, the other thing that sort of impressed me about him was the fact that he was slightly older than us, and again, sort of much as I did, he was taking this music seriously. A lot of people, even people of my own age, who had sort of grown up listening to the same sort of stuff I did, were writing it off as sort of cartoon nonsense and didn't see it as important at all, whereas I saw it as very important. And obviously so did Gordon. So that impressed me. And yeah, like I said, he was obviously sort of passionate about writing songs, and I didn't discover just how passionate until I met up with them the following week, and he was asking sort of were we interested in writing songs about our own lives, and I said, well, we've already done that, and glibly, oh, I've already written about my own life. That's that done. Sorted in a 3-minute song, and he basically, from his inside pocket, he produced almost a finished lyric for Suspect Device and said,
Right.
could you do anything with that?
Right.
And I was just completely blown away by it. And I sort of took it away, and the following week he came along to a rehearsal, and I'd written the music for it, and I'd also written Wasted Life, and in the same time, and it just suddenly all this stuff just started pouring out of not just me but him as well, and
Right.
I mean, I think we must have written the songs for the first album in about sort of a month and a half.
My goodness.
It was really very, very quick.
Right, right. And so the next stage was that you were writing songs together, and you tried to get a single out. Did get a single out, but it was 500 copies, and it was very punk in that it was a completely homegrown thing.
Sure.
On Red Digit.
Rigid Digits.
Rigid Digit.
As in Stiff Little Fingers.
Right. So that came out, and that was totally your own production. Yeah, you're doing the sleeves.
Yeah, really. Well, I mean, Gordon put up the money for it to actually get it recorded and pressed up and stuff. And the picture sleeve was a problem as well, because we had the design, but we had no way of getting it printed. And I mean, realistically, it was a miracle we'd managed to make a record, because none of us knew what we were doing. And so instead of getting the sleeves printed, Ali had a friend at the Polytechnic who had access to the office copier.
Right.
and he basically photocopied like 500 copies of this, and it was just on a sheet.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had to spend many's a night around Gordon's kitchen table with like scissors and pots of glue, and we basically cut these damn things out, folded them up, stuck them together, and put the records in them.
There's a rumour that some of them have orders at the local chippy.
Yeah, they do.
Is that true?
Yeah.
So you've got to look out. You've got to look out for a
They
one
do.
that has cod and chips
That's
and
right,
two
yeah.
lagers on the inside, and then you've got the real
You have
original
yeah. Yep.
SL. Yeah.
Yep, there were a couple, and
Right.
I think there were even a couple that got, God, I'm bored with this and stuff like that. But, you know, so. Yeah, so actually that was the first thing we spent money on when we got a return on the record sales, was getting somebody else to print the bloody sleeves, because
Right.
we didn't want to do that anymore.
But you had a very quick lucky break in that John Peel almost liked the record too much, because
Yeah.
he wouldn't stop playing it.
That's right. I mean, he played it something like 10 nights in a row or something like that.
Right, and you got 500 copies to sell.
Yeah, and they were like shipped across to, we tried, you know, sort of putting them in local record stores and stuff. That wasn't too much of a bother. People were actually very good about sort of taking them. There was a record shop in Ann Street called Caroline Music who were very supportive. And I believe even Terry Hooley at Good Vibrations took some, even though we weren't on his label. But the rest of them, I mean, to get them across to the mainland, excuse me, Gordon had a, excuse me, sorry about that. Gordon had a friend who worked in a record shop in either Edinburgh or Glasgow. And we got them across to him. We literally put them on a bread van and sent them across on the ferry. So they were like in among the sort of, you know, the cakes and the loaves of bread and stuff were like sort of a couple of hundred singles. And Rough Trade in London also took quite a few. And you know, very very quickly the thing went into reprint, which surprises, because I mean, it may not sound a lot, but 500 records is actually a hell of a lot when you've got them sitting in your back room, you know,
Yeah,
to look at them and think, how the hell are we going to get rid of all of those?
Right,
But
right.
we did. You know.
And it was through that John Peel exposure that you got interest from Ireland. Is that about?
Yeah, that's about the same time.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had a couple of people come across to see us, which, you know, was really unusual.
And and the Hot Rods connection there, and
There was, yeah. The Hot Rods played at the Ulster Hall, and we managed to get ourselves on the bill. We were like sort of third on the bill. And again, sort of unusually, Ed Hollis came with them. He was like their producer. And he happened, again, equally unusually, happened to be there when a third band on the bill were actually playing. And he sort of mentioned our names to people back in Hammersmith. And they came across to see us. We had the sort of hastily arranged gig at what was the Regency Hotel in Belfast. And they came across to see us. In fact, we were almost late for that because half the PA didn't turn up. And Gordon and I had to nip out in his car to go and get it. I mean, when I say PA, in those days, it was literally just sort of two vocal columns.
yeah.
So we had to shoot out and get it, and we actually got stuck in a riot. So it was like trying to get back. It was like, oh, for God's sake, was there any way round this to get back to where we're going? So, you know, only in Belfast, a lot of people here get stuck at traffic lights or behind sort of a slow-moving lorry. We got stuck in a bloody riot. But yeah, they said they liked what they heard, and they wanted to take it further. So they flew us across to London to do demos and stuff, and actually Ed Hollis produced those, which surprised us as well. So that's when we thought they must be really serious. I mean, they got as far as actually offering us a deal.
Was that the Alternative Ulster session?
Yeah, Alternative
Right.
Ulster was recorded then.
Right.
Yeah, they got as far as offering us a deal, but then...
And it was quite healthy for those times, I gather. Figures of 35,000
It was, yeah.
pounds, or more, which was healthy for those days.
Well, it
wasn't
was certainly, you know, it was certainly enough for us to
Gives-
be able to sort of give up our jobs and move across the water. But the story we heard back was that when Chris Blackwell heard the tapes, he just thought it was unmarketable in America, so that was the end of that, really. Of course, by
this
that
nearly-
stage, we had given up our jobs and
Right.
stuff. So
It was nearly a disaster, wasn't it, for the band?
Absolutely.
You almost got to saying, right, enough of this.
Mm.
We've given up our jobs. We can't get our jobs back. We can't
Yeah.
go forward. It was nearly disaster. Yeah.
yeah, we did think of giving up for like an afternoon or something.
Right. Who talked you back into it?
Well, we sort of half talked ourselves back into it, and I also recall, 'cause at this stage Colin had moved to Dublin, and he came up, we had a meeting in Gordon's flat. Gordon had been moved to London by the newspaper at that point as well, so we were in touch with him just by phone. And I remember Colin turned up from Dublin with like sort of 24 pack of lager and a bottle of vodka, and basically sort of drank us into, yeah, we'll keep going. We'd already decided we were going to at that point anyway, because apart from else, you stopped and thought about it, there was nothing else to do, really.
Right.
I mean, Gordon had never for a second thought that we would quit.
Yeah.
And again, if you stop and think about it, there's sort of, one record company rejection and we were ready to throw it all in,
Right.
Bunch of quitters.
Well, Jake Burns, thanks very much, and all the best for an optimistic future.
Thank you.